Right?
Yes.
Okay, I hope you got that. That was great. One of those author moments.
You can go ahead.
For my first question, did you always want to be a writer?
I would have usually answered that no, but now that I'm looking back, yeah, I pretty much did. I always loved reading, and at 14, after reading a writer named Paul Zindel, I really wanted to do what he did. He told the truth, and his fiction was authentic, and it really connected with me, and I really thought that that's what I wanted to do. So at about 14, I was dead sure I wanted to be a writer.
Was there one Paul Zindel book in particular?
There were a few. The Pigman was the one I started with. It was the most, I think that was the most popular when it came to what like 7th or 8th graders were reading at the time. But then once I dug in, there were two others. One would be, and this is the one I recommend, which is Confessions of a Teenage Baboon. The other one was called Pardon Me, You're Stepping on My Eyeball, which is a fantastic book.
When did you begin to call yourself a writer?
That's a complicated question, because a lot of people in the outside world will only call you a writer once they can find your book in a bookstore. And my first two books, even though the second won a large national award, you still couldn't find it in a bookstore. Barnes & Noble is a very interesting market. But me, myself, I think I knew I was a writer the minute I started writing. Sometimes I doubted it, though. And I was definitely scared to tell people, because the first question they ask is, well, what have you had published? And then you're sunk.
Is there a certain book or a movie that inspired you to write?
Absolutely. Fantastic question. Yes. I first moved to Dublin. I moved to Ireland when I was 4, I think. And I wasn't allowed to work at first. So I come from a workaholic family, so not working was very difficult for me. So what I did was I decided to read all the books that I had always wanted to read. So I read a book a day or more for about 6 months, 9 months, something like that, until I sat and read Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses. I didn't read it because of all the press surrounding it. I read it because I knew it was magical realism and that I would really like it. And it's a hard book, but let me tell you, I will never forget the day. I can see it in my head, where I closed the back cover, got up from my reading chair, moved back into my back room, which was my bedroom in the little flat I lived in, and I started writing my first book that very morning.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a heck of a book.
What is it about books that makes you want to write them or read them?
That's a good question. I'm a picky reader, David, so I like to be gripped right away. I like to really, not gripped, it doesn't have to be action. It can be a character. I need to emotionally connect with a character. Same goes for any movie. And so that's, pretty much what I look for in reading. And it's the same in writing. I write by the seat of my pants, so I actually don't know what's going to happen every day when I sit down in front of the typewriter. That was just the first 4 books. Now I have this cool thing called a computer. I know. So, but when I sit down to write, I don't know what's coming. So it's the surprise and that emotional connection on the other side too, being a writer. So it's the same in a way.
Is there like a special order you write your books in? Like, do you start with the end and then write the beginning? That's
a great question. A lot of people, every writer has a different way of doing it, right? I start with a character. Very rarely, like you're sitting next to Reality Boy. Reality Boy's prologue is actually the first words I wrote in that book. Very rarely do the first words still end up in the beginning. Usually they get shoved into the second or third, chapter. But I start with a character. I start with emotion. I have no idea where the plot is going at that point, which can be very frustrating. And around the halfway point. But I write by the seat of my pants. I start at the beginning. I go to the end. Revision is everything. Everything. I can push out a book pretty quickly, but revision's everything.
When you got the idea to write Reality Boy, where were you and how did it come to you?
You want the truth? I was in the shower. And I was on my way to Princeton, New Jersey to be interviewed by zombies. That is a true story. On television, I was going to be interviewed by zombies. So, I was late. I'd been working in the morning, and I got the idea in the shower, and I just had this idea that if 1 in 4 kids, have suffered some sort of abuse before, as children and before they're 18, wouldn't this ratio, also stand true for the kids that we're watching on reality television? Yeah. Now, I don't watch television, so it's kind of ironic that I had this thought. But I had the idea in the shower and left the shower early because I figured, well, the zombies won't care if my hair's conditioned or not, and wrote that beginning that's still there.
If you could change one major aspect of Reality Boy, what would you change and what would you change it to?
We don't do that. I don't do that. I don't read my books once they're published. Once they're in that hardcover, I'll read them in advanced copy stage. I wouldn't change a thing. When it's done, I've been through it for probably, it takes me a good year to write a book, a year and a half to revise a book, and then with my editor again, revising again, nothing. There's definitely people that will find certain things they didn't like or things that were open-ended, but I do tend to leave a lot of little things in my books open-ended because the idea for me isn't to clear up the story. The idea is to make a reader think. The idea is to make a reader think and make their own minds up. So I wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't change a thing.
Is there one literary student, like you talked about in your speech, in particular that empowered you the most?
Student? What do you mean by literary student?
You said you were teaching.
Oh, literacy student.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, I will. Yeah, literacy student. So I was teaching adults how to read. There were 2, but the one who I'll call Jay, he was about 55. Had, I kid you not, you ready for this? 20 brothers and sisters. Okay, 2-room thatched cottage. So he was living in a house with his mother, his father, his 2 grandparents, and 20 siblings. And he had no skills. He had nothing. He didn't have the alphabet, didn't have numbers, didn't have any of that. And yet, he could take apart and put back together any combustion engine you gave him. He could take apart any tractor, including antique tractors, and put them back together again. The guy was so smart, and I had always wanted to learn about combustion engines. So I said, let's make this a trade. I'll teach you, and actually I didn't do his literacy. We had another person that was dealing with basic alphabet stuff, where at that time I was doing numeracy. So I said, I'll get you to the multiplication tables if you finally help me understand how a combustion engine works. Yeah, so he was very inspirational. He was fantastic, and he had so much going against him, and he still succeeded. It's amazing to watch him.
Wow. What do your parents think about you being a writer?
They love it.
Yeah.
They love it now, David. Yeah. They love it now. At first it was tough because I was unpublished I was unagented. I didn't get an agent until 12 years, 7 novels in 12 years. I wasn't published until 8 novels in 15 years. Once I got the agent, it was a little bit more like I was legit. But that's a long time for your parents to look at relatives and say, so what's Amy doing now? And sort of have to answer that question. But now they love it. They read my books. They understand that I always have to apologize when they hand them a book and say, look, I write about kind of horrible parents. I swear they're not you. And, but they seem to dig what I'm doing. Yeah. They're very supportive.
Did something happen in your life to make you decide to write this book?
Reality Boy?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Did something happen in my life? Something happened in the life of someone close to me. And so when you read Reality Boy and you read that mother and that sister character especially, they are an amalgam of several people I know, and sadly they are toned down from the real life version. So yes, and to watch that person come out of an awful, awful childhood and succeed really inspired me.
Are you trying to send a message by writing Reality Boy about how TV shows can affect people's lives?
It's a good question, but I don't ever try and send a message. I always feel like teenagers I think teenagers generally are, how do I put this without insulting adults? They're very smart and open-minded. They still remember the periodic table of elements. Whenever I speak to adults, I ask them for a show of hands, how many of you remember calculus? And none of them do. I find teenagers to just be so spongy and open-minded, and they can spot a message at 10 paces. So I don't plan on giving any messages. I want them to make their own message from what they read. But if I was to make a comment on television, I would say it rots your brain. That's why I don't watch it. So that's just my own opinion now. That's not what I wanted to put in the book.
Since part of this book are a little embarrassing, I wonder if your parents and friends have read this book, and what do they think?
Embarrassing? You mean like what I used to do on TV?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there comes a point where you can't care about what anybody thinks in this business, and there really is, because I don't know if you've seen like internet sites that have, it's like a rodeo with lots of reviews and things like this. I can't go to those places. It's not because I'm a delicate little flower, but it's because I'm writing 2 new books and I don't have the time to care, what other people think. But when it comes to my family, they've known me long enough. They know I'm pretty out there, so I don't think it was surprising or embarrassing for them at all. And what was surprising to me, David, was someone wrote to me from my junior high school days on Facebook and said, "Hey, did you write this about so-and-so? Because remember, he did that once." And I'm like, I never heard that, because in junior high school, I was not paying attention. But so far, no embarrassment. I would think that with the critical parents that are in many of my books, that it might be a little difficult. I'm a mom. If my kids started writing books with very critical parents, I think that it would make me wonder. But I reassure them, that it's not them. So no, not really. No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, David. It was lovely talking to you.
You too.
Thanks.
So, Owen, if you want to ask like 1 or 2 questions, you can.
Sure.
Is
this at all? You good?
Can you hear her, Luis?
Yeah. So my question is about Ask the Passengers, which by the way I
You're
love.
Owen. Yes.
I'm
Hi,
Owen.
Owen. Yes, I remember now.
And so my question is, what made you decide to put in the aspects of magical realism into the story?
Magical realism shows up in my books every time. So no matter which of my books you read, there's always a little aspect. The one coming to you in 2016, not this year's book, but next year's, is actually a surrealist novel. A lot of that is just the influence of what I read. I love, especially South American magic realism, and also somewhere in there, actually, can I borrow this, Dave?
Yeah.
There's somebody asked me once, and they put it in my little blurb on the flap, but some people don't know if my characters are crazy or if they're experiencing something magical. I think that's an accurate description of how I feel every day. And that's really how I feel. Like, I really do think there's something going on. I don't know what it is, but I think that there's something going on. I do, like when I sit in an airport and I stare at someone's head and send love to them because I can see they're having a bad day, and then suddenly I can see their shoulders relax. I wonder if that was me sending love or if they just took a chill pill or something. But, magical realism shows up in all of my work. With Ask the Passengers, the actual sending love to the passengers was something I've been doing since I'm 5. I still do it. My kids do it. Everybody I know does it once they read that book. So I still do it from planes, too. I sent love to all of you as I was landing in Denver.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
What really inspired you to build the characters in your book?
Which one? All books?
I've only read
Reality Boy?
but I loved it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. What inspired me to build him? Well, anger is wow. Have you gone on the internet and seen how angry everybody is? So anger is something I've dealt with for a long time. Not necessarily me, because I'm this chilled Pisces chick. I am angry deep down, I'm sure, at certain things. I'm very angry at the culture. I'm angry that I'm raising 2 daughters that can't turn on the television without seeing totally unrealistic ideals of beauty. And I feel the same way about young men. So I'm angry at society for a lot of things. But when it comes to Gerald's anger, I lived near a reality television star, one that you would know, who I'm not going to name, who might have had 8 children. And one of those, I lived about 1.5 miles from that family. Now, I didn't pay attention because I've never watched the show, and I don't know them or anything like that. But I did see that when one of the little guys, he was about 5, that when he was in kindergarten, he got kicked out of kindergarten. And it was national news. Now, I've made mistakes. Y'all have made mistakes. Imagine if every mistake you made was national news. how angry you'd be after a while. So that kind of helped build it, in the beginning. But really, it is loosely based on two people I know who had really difficult childhoods and very similar parents. And so building Gerald was easy. And even his awkwardness when he met Hannah, that's her name. Sorry. I wrote that book so long ago. I'm in 2016. All authors come to you from the future. I'm in 2016. So even when he met Hannah, the awkwardness that was there, that just kind of came naturally because maybe I've experienced it in being the Hannah role, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Amy, so much.
You're very welcome.